Welcome to Cosmic Comics, Games and Collectibles, your zen of geekism. We carry comics old and new, magazines, toys, games like Pokemon, Magic, D&D. Want Godzilla, Ultraman, Star Trek, Ninja Turtles, Funko Pops? You'll find it all here. Shop our Cosmic Sound Room and pick up a record or two. Enjoy our Comic Coffee Lounge with a cup of Sasquatch coffee or a delicious menu item while geeking out over a super cool movie on our big screen. Come by and say hello to Maui. Cosmic Comic, Games and Collectibles. Superman loves us, and so will you.
And good evening. I am RJ Carter, Senior Managing Editor here at criticalblast.com. And tonight, something completely different, but one of my passion projects, you might say. I know normally we're here talking about pop culture and crowdfunded comics and movies and such. And we are going to talk a little bit about movies, but not the kind you usually think of. We'll talk about some documentaries out there. You might have seen some things in the news lately, perhaps 60 Minutes, where people are starting to talk rather openly about the what used to be called the unidentified flying object phenomenon, now known as the, I want to say unidentified aerial phenomenon, or unexplained aerial phenomenon. I'm not sure what the new U stands for, but I do know somebody who does know what the new U stands for. We have with us tonight Mr. Steve Bassett. Steve, how are you tonight?
RJ, it's Opus and I, he's up there, are happy to be with you tonight.
Glad to do it. Now, So which one is it? Is it unidentified or unexplained when it's a UAP?
That's interesting. The UAP acronym was deliberately introduced to try to get away from the UFO acronym, which had been pretty much corrupted and by the government, right? I mean, and all the ridicule was heaped on it. So UAP it means the same thing.
Yeah.
Some people say unexplained aerial phenomena. Some say unidentified aerial phenomena. I like the unexplained aerial phenomena because that takes it completely away from UFO, right? The acronym is completely different. I don't have anything against UFO, and I know the term is not going to go away anytime soon. But over the decades, it was that little acronym that got all the ridicule heaped on it. So the moment you uttered that acronym, well, guess what?
It became schlocky.
So now you say UAP or unexplained aerial phenomena, people are going, oh yeah, really? That's I hear that's pretty important.
Yeah,
are you involved in
Bug-Eyed Monster or LGM or anything like that?
Yeah.
Before we get too deep into our discussion, Steve, can you give the viewers a little bit of your background? To give you the gravitas and credentials that allows you to speak to the topic.
My website is paradigmresearchgroup.org, and I'm a political activist. I'm not a researcher. I'm not a contactee. I've never had that. Never have a sighting, frankly. I got into this field in 1996 as an activist in order to help resolve the issue through political means. And I did that because I had concluded that the problem was not science. It was obvious to me the science was there. The evidence was there. It was piled up to the ceiling. And I'd been noticing that and watching that since I was a teenager. And I kept waiting for the government to come out and say, hey, guess what? They never did. Then when I decided to get into the field, late in life, I should tell you, but hey, second act. Again, I thought, well, if the evidence is not enough, if the evidence is there, but we're not getting any government involvement, why? Political. It was a political decision to embargo this issue back in the 1940s, 47, 48, 9, 50, 53, for national security reasons. And they were serious, very serious about it.
And you've coined the term truth embargo to describe that.
I own that. You owe me a nickel. Send it. You can mail it or send it by Venmo. And therefore, and I had an activist mentality. I mean, I never really became a professional activist. I just wasn't able to get it together, but I marched in various movements and things and all when I was younger. So really that's who I was. And so it was like I was finding myself later in life. And the idea was this: if you want to know the truth about the extraterrestrial presence, you're going to have to get the government to change its political policy of embargo. And the truth embargo, get the information. And so that's what I've been doing for 24 years with various projects of one or another. Almost everything I do is focused on moving us closer to the day when the government of the United States, head of state, it'll have to be the president, confirms to us, yes, you're not alone. There's ETs here. Sorry, we didn't tell you sooner, but we were a little concerned about it or whatever.
Yeah. Now, was there a watershed moment, perhaps not in your personal life, but in history that you were there for, that said, okay, this is the day I'm going to form paradigm research and I'm going to start studying this full time for real?
Yeah. Well, there's a number of things that led up to my decision in 1996. But we don't need to go there. But I started my engagement of this issue. I got very lucky and was able to get John Mack's organization in Cambridge, Massachusetts, the famous Harvard-trained psychiatrist that wrote the book Abduction, to volunteer for them and go out for about 4 months. And I spent about 4 months up in Cambridge around these people and some contactees and whatever. It was really a wonderful experience. They treated me very well. So I'm now in it, right? And at that time, I mean, it was just so powerful to be there. And so that got me energized. But I was a volunteer. And so at some point, usually what happens is if it's appropriate, you might get brought into an organization and put on the payroll. Otherwise, you have to move on at some point. So after 4 months, it was time for me to move on. And I'm sitting up there, and it was like an epiphany that downloaded in my head. Okay, the problem is political. What can you do? And it just hit me. Boom. I'd lived in Washington off and on for most of my life. I knew it very well. I had family there. I had a place to stay, free. And it occurred to me, what if I were to go move to Washington now, set up an organization and register as a lobbyist on the extraterrestrial issue? No one had ever done that. I was certain that no one had ever done that. I would be the first ET lobbyist. They referred to me for years as the UFO lobbyist. I didn't like that, but what can you do? And so that's exactly what I did. I went down to Washington area. I set up the office. I registered as a lobbyist on this issue, extraterrestrial issue, the need for congressional hearings, etc. Didn't take long. The Washington Post saw that listing and said, we need to talk to this guy. So they sent out a reporter and interviewed me, and I got a front of the business section, full front page article in the business section, which is almost as good as the front page of the Washington Post, with a photo, big photo, worst photo of me ever taken. I look absolutely terrible. And that was it. I was in. And I worked from there. And so that, I guess, the watershed moment was the epiphany up in Cambridge when I realized my path, right? You can have a passion about something, but if you don't have a path, what, right? In fact, having a passion and no path can be very upsetting. And so as of today, I think we're up to 546 articles in English language press has been written about myself and my work, which is nice. And I've given anywhere between 12 and 1,400 interviews. And so forth and so forth. So anyway, I'm a communicator, an educator. I'm also a lobbyist, but I'm also an activist. And the role of the activist, as has been said, is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable.
There you go.
That's kind of what I do, right? There's a lot of people in government that I've afflicted, and I'm sorry, and I hope they'll forgive me.
Okay, so the term conspiracy gets used a lot with UFOs and anti-UFO and what have you, and the problem always with conspiracy is that they have to be small. You know, you get I write about an organization that's secret as an author myself, And the whole thing is that, if more than two people know about it, well, it's like Ben Franklin said, two can keep a secret if one is dead.
Yeah.
So the more that know, the better the chance of leaking. You've said that the truth embargo, the reason for it is purely political. From an American perspective,
it's political as a national security policy.
Yes.
That's the political basis for it. It's a national security policy, and that has to be instituted by who? The president, supported by the Congress. So it's a political thing. It's not scientific research. The truth embargo is not about scientific research. In fact, it tries to discourage it. So this is a political, just like, remember they embargoed Cuba?
Yes.
They said,
well, it
totally
wasn't
legal. Totally legal policy. And they said, hey, you can't go there. And if you do, you could have some problems. That was a political decision, okay? The difference between that political decision and the one we're dealing with is this. What if the government had basically decided, we don't want anybody to go to Cuba, so we're not going to let them go if we can stop them. But the way we're going to prevent it is we're going to start publicizing and encouraging those who will participate to tell the world there's no Cuba. There isn't a Cuba. There's no Cuba. There's no island.
Yeah, there's nothing
so
there.
There's nowhere to go. So it's okay. And so if you convince enough people, there's nothing down there, no problem. Okay? And so what you'd be creating is a sort of de facto embargo of Cuba by denying its very existence. That's what the government did on the ET issue. They embargoed it by denying its very existence, which made dealing with it a lot more complicated than, say, dealing, and people have, politically with the issue of should Cuba be embargoed.
Sure. We have a question in the comments here. Is one questioning, was the Cold War part of the reason for the truth embargo?
Very much so. When the U.S. government got, those that need to know, first learned about the extraterrestrial presence in 47, no later than 47. Some people think, well, you talk about Roswell? Yeah. Well, how do you know it was an extraterrestrial thing? Well, because the evidence shows that, okay? There's like piles of it, but I'll tell you, if you want to get the Roswell thing down, just go read one book, Witness to Roswell by Don Schmidt and Thomas Carey. But get the Witness to Roswell expanded version, because you don't want to miss the deathbed testimony.
Right.
And you read that book. Any reasonable person that reads that book and thinks that Roswell was anything but an extraterrestrial event needs to start taking some Prevagen, Prevagen stuff, okay? And so but they might have known sooner. There's just a book out by Jacques Vallée talking about a crash event in 45. It may have happened, all right, in which case they got something then. But Roswell was particularly important because a press release was put out. The cat was let out of the bag for a while. So it's a big, so anyway, the government's known about it since 1945, 47. Why did they embargo? Guess what? The presence of the extraterrestrials, and I say the presence, the acceleration or the increase in activity of the extraterrestrial presence in 47, I am certain was directly connected to the bombs dropped in Japan. They had watched us test them, build them, test them, and then we made the final statement. We dropped them on human beings.
Right.
Apparently, this shifted the situation in such a way that the extraterrestrial species engaging us altered their agenda. And that included flying all over the place and being seen all over the place and what have you. All right, fine. So there's a connection right there. But by 1947, the United States Army and intelligence and so forth, and the White House were well aware that we were headed towards some problems with the Soviet Union. Winston Churchill gave a speech at a college in that year where he talked about the Iron Curtain over Europe. Our intelligence people already knew that not only did the Soviet Union have the nuclear secrets on both atom and hydrogen bombs, but they were trying to build them. And they also knew that they had a bunch of German rocket scientists just like we got. So they're going to build the missiles. And so it was pretty clear what was going to happen. World War III.
Yeah.
Because that's what we do. That's how humans roll. You have wars and wars and wars and wars. And then each war, the weapons get better. The number of people killed get more. Whatever. That's how we roll. And I'm not complaining here. I'm not criticizing them. That's what they saw. And so so now you've got ET craft, you've got dead ET bodies. You know that you're being engaged. You have no idea where they're from, what they want, who they are. There was one live one. I forget how long he hanged around, but this is a massive issue to deal with as a nation. At the same time, you know you're headed for what could be nuclear war with the Soviet Union. And you just got through World War II. And so they made the decision, this is classified. This is going to remain classified until we know more, until the situation with the Soviet Union is more understood, maybe developed and gone in the right direction. And when you talk about classification, it's one thing to classify some bomber you're working on. But when you're talking about extraterrestrials here, they classified it as high as they could. This became the most classified thing in the United States government. Same for the other nations that learned about Roswell around the same time. Believe me, we told Winston Churchill. So it's very, very classified. Okay. But there was a problem because unlike some bomber you're working on in a hangar somewhere that nobody can get to and it's totally secret, the ETs could go anywhere they wanted.
Right.
So you got to classify something that can be seen at any time by anybody. This required a formidable effort. And let me say matter-of-factly, the truth embargo, as conducted by the United States for 74 years now, in cooperation with its allies, is one of the most extraordinary accomplishments of any nation or kingdom ever. It is amazing that they were able to do it. And without having to round a bunch of people up and killing them, right? Without having to go the authoritarian route, meaning you know about this, you're dead. And purge. No, we did it within a constitutional republic. Quite amazing. And so, yes, absolutely connected to the Cold War, which has been reconfirmed many times, not the least of which every time the ETs come down and turn our nuclear weapons off or the Soviet nuclear weapons off. That kind of hooks it to the nuclear issue, doesn't it?
Yes, right? A little bit. Yeah, I've heard the stories of how, you know, the lights in the sky are seen and, you know, suddenly all the lights are off in, like, you know, the launch facilities in North Dakota or something.
Not lights in the sky. The disc comes down and hovers over the fence.
Oh, well, then.
Okay. You get me here? Okay.
Yeah.
Hovers over the fence. The security people are scrambling everywhere. They don't know what the hell to do. They didn't hurt anybody. One guy I know, at least in one instance, got hurt because, and this is kind of funny, he's a security guy up top on a SAC base, right?
Sure.
Fairly serious work. And so he's outside the fence and the damn thing comes down and he just absolutely scared him to death. And remember, and I don't know where the hell the gate was, but he just basically just climbed over the fence. Apparently, he just said, "I want to get over that fence," right? And so he cut himself on some razor wire or something, and then he gets on the other side. I mean, you know, panic. Okay,
yeah.
But think about it for a second. You know, okay, he's on the other side of the fence. What difference does it make?
The thing flies.
Now, if he could get into the silo, and maybe that was his next idea, I'm getting into that silo. But no, that's the kind of testimony we have. There are dozens of such witnesses, high-level SAC-based officers with security clearances that have been telling these stories since 2000. And the truth embargo was so successful that, no big deal. No problem. No hearings, nothing. They gave press conferences and the press wrote it up and like, oh, okay, fine. Moved on to something else.
It's not even so much, and I'm not taking away from your term, but I'm thinking that it's not so much as an embargo as it is a masquerade. The way they let the truth get out, because all the stories that I would have read in print in the 70s, in the early 80s of UFOs, you know, they were relegated to media that also had, you know, dog-faced boys and bat children and all that stuff. So that you could tell your story, but no one's going to believe it because it was so obviously fake, because it was with all this other paranormal related garbage that that it got tainted by that. So if somebody else could come out and tell their story, of course it's going to get a meh, because we've heard it all before and we already know it's fiction before you open your mouth. Exactly.
Your comment is on the mark. But the truth embargo was many, many things.
Yeah.
Embargoing, say, Cuba is easy. You just put some ships around it right? Of course, that's kind of a blockade. Or you have some chips patrolling the area, and you just keep people from going there. It's pretty simple. Embargoing the ET reality, given what I just said earlier, not so simple. And so they had to employ every manner of device and technique, and you can imagine, to somehow keep this contained. And they did.
Yeah.
And so the masquerade you feel is one aspect of the truth embargo. There are many other aspects. So it's many things, but they all boil down to the same thing, truth embargo. I like the way the questions pop up on your screen.
Oh, I highlight them over here. So if you could see them, that's great. I won't. But normally I read them out loud. Robert Roberts is in the chat. He would like to know, what role does your guest believe L. Ron Hubbard and his Sea organization have offering disclosure outside of nation-state control? I have no idea what he's talking about. I hope you do. No,
he's referring to the Sea organization as part of Scientology. L. Ron Hubbard founded Scientology. I'm not aware of any role. I assure you, as things get more and more closer to disclosure, every organization of every type is going to want to have something to say and perhaps get involved. But I'm not aware of any involvement of that organization that is at this point impacting the disclosure process.
All right. Also in the chat, Lorenzo says, I've read accounts of mysterious airships from the 1800s. Some believe they could have been flown by extraterrestrials, but that was well before the nuclear weapons in the Cold War. I'll take that a step further. We have writings of George Washington, who saw lights in the sky before crossing the Delaware. And also, the handwriting of Thomas Jefferson that talks about sightings of what looked to have been extraterrestrial involvement. They've been very busy over America since the founding of the country.
What can I say? As an alumnus of Ancient Aliens, and by the way, RIP to Kevin Burns, the creator of Ancient Aliens, absolute genius of a man. I can tell you, the ETs have been around forever.
Yes.
Prior to civilization, and by that I mean way back. I mean any civilization, back to the flood, and maybe some civilizations. I say some relatively extant civilizations that might have existed before this catastrophic event, which we're getting some information about. And prior to all that, whether they were here or not was like irrelevant to human condition by and large. So 200,000 years ago, there were Homo sapiens sapiens on this planet, and ETs can come down, go, do whatever the hell they wanted. Nothing. We didn't have writing. We couldn't, and at some point we didn't have much speech. So, but have ETs of one species or another been visiting this planet for a long time? There is no reason why that hasn't been happening for 1 million years, 2 million years, and whatever. Okay.
Right.
Obviously, we're pretty much concerned about now. Okay. But the fact is that I believe that the extraterrestrial presence is amply confirmed in ancient times by that series. Now, and it's an amazing series, one of the most successful of all time, and it's still going, even without Kevin. So if now I know that any archaeologist or a typical scientist, when they watch that, they just want to tear their hair out. I mean, they can't bear it. That is an artifact of modern science right now that needs to be fixed, frankly. But the fact is that if you watch Ancient Aliens, what you're going to learn is, if you look at the big picture, not some specific thing, that there's been a presence of these ETs for a very long time. And a lot of what they have put forward will prove true, and some of it will not prove true. But as a way to get at least a look at the full picture of the last 10,000 years and the possible ET engagement, nobody's even come close to this. The amount of work that went into this is extraordinary. Of course, George Tsoukalos was the key person working with Kevin Burns and Van Daniken. And so for those that are thinking, gee, were they around in the 1800s? Yeah. However, it's safe to say that their activity, their agenda, the way they were has changed from time to time, right? So what they were doing in 1800 and what they're doing in 1960 could be very, very different. What we know is that in the modern era, something profound changed, and that occurred in 1947. So that 1896 event and the alien that got buried, and then they couldn't find the grave, and the gravestone disappeared, and all this kind of stuff. Who knows? Could very well be true. By and large, though, everything that happened in the 1900s, 1800s regarding ETs is of not much consequence, frankly. We don't, we'll learn. Everything that's happened in the 20th century, particularly starting in 47, that's a huge consequence. And the more we know about that, the better.
Well, Ancient Aliens has gone a long way to getting the word out in media, in visual media. And, somebody else who's been doing that is Darcy Weir, who's joining us here. He's a filmmaker and documentarian. Darcy, welcome to the show.
Hey, RJ, how's it going?
We're doing all right. Glad that you were able to join us here. I wanted to reach out to you a couple of weeks ago, and one of our writers reviewed your film Underground,
Okay.
which is the story of the Dumbs, and that's DUMB, just like you would think, but that stands for Deep Underground Military Base. But especially with as I was telling Steve, the trickle of news coming out in the mainstream about UFO sightings and UFO acknowledgments, UAP acknowledgments. It just seemed like the right time to get you guys in here and find out what's new in the circles where you are more closely monitoring this than Joe Public, who's just turning on the nightly news while he's eating his meatloaf and potatoes. Now, Steve, you talked about the.
By the way, if I interrupt,
go ahead.
It's really, your audience may be stunned to know, it's really hard to believe. Darcy and I are the same age.
Yeah.
That's incredible, isn't it?
I'm an ancient alien.
Yeah. All right, I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt. What's the question?
Well, you talked about how the alien agenda had changed from like the 1800s and far beyond that to around 1947. My question would be, are they the same aliens?
Good point. First of all, no disrespect to Jim Mars, but we don't like to use the word alien. That's changing too.
Okay.
It's extraterrestrial. Now, I admit there's so many syllables there. It's a pain, but it's and most people misspell it the first 20 times they use it. But we prefer extraterrestrials or ET, not alien. The ET agenda. Absolutely. Let me give you an example. In Roswell, during that early 1947s, you had the craft seen by Arnold over Mount Rainier, Kenneth Arnold.
Right.
They were not saucers. They were chevron, right? Chevron type craft, right? Seemingly partially aerodynamic. Those craft were seen a number of other places in 47, right? The crash vehicle at Roswell was not a saucer. It was a chevron-shaped craft.
Yeah, so
Okay.
kind of like a triangular shaped craft, but like a boomerang.
Yeah, kind of like a boomerang, but kind of a fat boomerang. Okay.
Yeah, sort of like the B-1 bomber.
Yeah, a
But
little
they
more
didn't, have,
rounded.
they didn't have the B-1 bomber back in 1947.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yes.
that's the idea. It's not a round saucer. It is a kind of chevron craft that looks somewhat aerodynamic. The beings that were in it, and people have drawn them. People that saw them have drawn them. Okay. A lot of people go, what do you mean they drew them? Drew them? How could they drew them? Because they saw them. Oh, really? They saw them? You mean they were in Roswell? Yeah. You know how many hundreds of witnesses have been interviewed from Roswell?
Lots.
They
Yeah.
drew them. Now, they are small. They have rounded heads. They had smaller eyes, a bit of an Asian touch to them. They look nothing like the Greys. And as far as I know, they're not around anymore. Okay, now, what am I getting to? I'm going to speculate that in the first half of the 20th century, leading into the 1940s, there were X number of ET species around doing whatever the hell they wanted, okay? But not all these species are at the same level of technology.
Sure. Makes sense.
In fact, I've said this the other night, something I'm going to be emphasizing. It's very likely that the two things most in common to the species that are dealing with this is that their technology is close to ours. They're not too far ahead, and they're relatively nearby. So if you're a species that's like 10,000 light years away and you're like 500,000 years ahead of the society, what? You could care less about us. We're not going to get involved. In other words, it's like the table. Yeah, it's like the tables in the cafeteria in high school. Remember those? Certain people sat at certain tables, and you didn't sit at this table over here, right? You weren't in that group, all right? So they're close to us, which is important to know, because this idea they're millions of years ahead is just ridiculous. Okay, so some of that tech was not as advanced. So when the situation changed because of the bombs in Japan, and the fact that we were going to clearly build them and build the missiles and the whole 9 yards, and the situation changed. In other words, things got serious. I believe the key thing about that change was that the ETs knew that now a process was going to have to be undertaken, however, leading to disclosure, leading to this global civilization acknowledging our presence, which would open the door for open contact. And the nuclear thing was key to that change. So in other words, it's serious now, very serious. And I believe the less developed ETs that are not quite have the tech, that it could even be shot down for whatever reason, apparently some were basically told, fellas, it's big boy time. You need to leave. All right, there's serious work to be done here, and your presence is not appropriate. And they took off. How many? We don't know. And then what was left to engage us from 47 on? And we know a lot about them. But it's obviously tricky information because it comes from contactees. These are the ones that we're going to be dealing with going down the line. We are acceptable to them as part of an alliance, and they are prepared to engage us. And it looks like there's 5 or 6. And by and large, when you're talking ETs, generally each species should have its own planet, but it's not impossible for 2 fully separate sentient species to develop. In other words, we could have a hominid, a gorilla group or something that evolved to the point where they can make computers. And there'd be 2 separate species that can make computers. I don't think so, because Darwinian evolution applies all over the galaxy. And so as that happens, one of those species is going to get rid of all the rest.
RJ, if there's like a piece of literature that I recommend you to read, or maybe even your listeners that are interested in this subject and they really want to go down the rabbit hole, a very prolific writer and historian on this subject that has done an amazing job of documenting military cover-ups since the beginning of this phenomenon, straight on to the supposed alien species that might be interacting with us. The writer's name is Richard Dolan, and he recently, actually just the end of last year, published a book called The Alien Agendas, a speculative analysis of those visiting Earth. And it sounds like a pretty far out there title, right? But what I like about this writer, what I like about this man's work is it's not sensationalism that he presents. It's not, written in fiction. It's written in fact. He literally just goes to the most credible cases that have happened in history. There's people that we call them experiencers in the field, people that have had first contact. These are folks that at one point in history, somebody has come down to the planet, either welcome or unwelcome, and they've decided to interact with us. And these civilians have lived to tell the tale of this interaction they had. And that book covers the link between many of the different cases that have been reported out there. And because there's so many cases that have happened throughout history that report little gray guys with big almond-shaped black eyes and an oblong head that's much larger than ours, and a very spindly, thin body, we can kind of deduce from the many reports that there must be some kind of species that's people call the Greys, and other people have put names to this species other than the Grey, right? Then there's people that have reported beings that look like humans, like quite honestly, that can blend in. If you're walking around a city, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference, except that they're much more highly evolved apparently, and they can do things that we can't sort of comprehend yet in terms of communication and intelligence and such. And they're just here for a visit, or maybe they have some kind of involvement with what's going on here on the planet. So as crazy as that sounds, there's lots of reports of it. And if you get so many reports, if you get so much sort of synchronizing in terms of this phenomenon, then I'm sure the American military has looked at this and taken many of these reports seriously. And that would be probably a good place to start if people are like, well, hey, wait a second. Now the government's cool with admitting that we're being visited by some off-worlders. The thing is, the military has known about this for a long time, and this is a PR exercise of some kind because they're trying to get ahead of something, in my opinion. Maybe that's just the human race being ready to wake up to this, and they want to help usher us into this new era. There's all kinds of ways that you can look at it, and as things unfold, we'll have more data and we'll understand a bit more what it really means, what this version of disclosure is. But there's a long history of it, of cover-up, right? And that can't be ignored. And that is, I think, one of the most pressing issues, because if all of this stuff has been said to us is not real for many, many years, up until the past 4, why now? Why are they interested in disclosing it? What's really at play here is kind of the questions we should be asking. And what in the history that's happened previously is the most credible information in terms of interactions that have been happening on the planet. Ancient Aliens is a cool show. I think it's really the speculation on ancient astronaut theory. I think it kind of jumped the shark post season 2, because they're calling the show Ancient Aliens, but they're literally reporting and talking about anything that's not even ancient. But that's a whole other issue. I think what that really is that there's an industry. There's a entertainment, so to speak, an extraterrestrial entertainment industry that people are fascinated by, and we got to keep that money machine going. So we're producing more and more stuff about it.
Oh yeah.
And even my documentaries kind of fall into that category. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, my documentaries are trying to inform people on something that's lesser reported, in mainstream media, but it costs money to put them together, and therefore, I look for some kind of return for my work. But I'm not a rich man. I'm a very middle class man. I'm more passionate about the subject than anything. But when just like you're reporting on Hollywood films, indie films, television shows, comic books, I'm sure, all kinds of media. And you see the good, the bad, and ugly. And even in this field, there's the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's a bunch of lies. There's a bunch of misinformation. There's a bunch of disinformation. And it comes from the community. It comes from the military. It basically comes from all sides. So just keep that in mind as like if you're looking at the disclosure thing as something serious, then you have to look at the more serious interpretations of the subject. And then you can get a better picture of what's going on around the planet. If you start to fill your mind with, season 9 of Ancient Aliens, which, I mean, I don't know how ancient it is in season 9.
13.
Season 13, there you go. I didn't even know they had season 13. And I'm a fan of Prometheus. I'm a fan of the earlier seasons because it did something for ancient astronaut theory. But when you get to season 13, it's like, come on, guys, just call the show something else now. And that is really the problem. Everywhere on this planet, you get the good, the bad, and the ugly, and anything. And this phenomenon is full of it. So,
well, now I lost where I was going to start my sentence, so I'm just going to jump in differently. We had talked about the cover-ups of the aliens or the ET's presence. And I was talking with Steve before he came on here, how it's difficult to cover something up the more people are involved in the cover-up. And yes, maybe in America you can have this mass conspiracy, but there's 193 other countries on this dirtball. How do you keep that many governments?
Many
on
of
the
them
same
have
paper.
Many of them have broken the silence. Like many countries, France released their UFO files much earlier than the United States. Brazil has done it. Mexico, to a certain degree, has done it. A couple of my documentaries I made with a journalist who's famous on reporting UFOs in Latin America. His name's Jaime Maussan. He's been doing it for over 40 years. This phenomenon is not isolated by any stretch of the imagination to the United States. It's not just, crazy Americans obsessed with stranger than fiction stories. In China, in recent years, they've shut down their airports in many different regions due to UFOs being in airspace that, was dangerous for flights to land. And maybe if you think about it, the Greys are us from the future. That's a theory. That is a theory. I've heard about this. And there's definitely, I think it's speculation. I think if you look into the subject and you hear about all the different versions of humanoids and maybe non-humanoids that have interfaced with the planet, it's more than just a evolved version of us. I'm not saying that that's impossible. I'm sure time travel is a thing.
That's a whole other show.
It's a whole other show, but time travel has been, proven to exist. We have tested it at very minute levels in certain areas of, well, that's basically black. We don't know if that's true, but it's a really cool story. But I mean, we're getting to the point with quantum physics and with things that we're doing in our modern day physics research that's getting us very close to proving time travel is possible to perform. Is it whole bodies inside of future spacecrafts that are coming back to interface with a earlier version of us? Maybe, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on that proves, in my opinion, that we're not alone in the cosmos, and some of our neighbors have come to check us out. It's possible some of them are cool. It's possible that some of them are not. And maybe the military is better informed on this narrative. There are some people, researchers in this field that I've spoken to over the 10 plus years I've been researching this stuff, and I'm just a baby in this subject, that are very convinced that there are nefarious entities that are interfacing with our planet, and possibly nefarious is just not something that's on their radar. It's not like empathy is something that they have, and maybe it's just that's the way some species are. We have boatloads of empathy, and then folks in our civilization that don't have empathy we call psychopaths. Maybe there's a race out there that the whole race are psychopaths. There is no empathy. So yeah,
Well,
I mean,
there's also the whole reason, sometimes you look at the news and you're like, oh, we're hearing some fantastic news of something here. This is unbelievable. This has got our ears perked up here. And the more cynical among us, or the more experienced among us, might say, why are you telling us this story? What are you hiding? What are you trying to distract us from? What's this shiny squirrel supposed to make us look away from? And we get these stories, the Pentagon coming out and saying, yes, we are in possession of craft that were not made on this earth. Well, maybe they meant that, they were made on the space station and shipped down. I don't think that's what they were implying. And then, the recent 60 Minutes interview where they had people, in positions of authority and knowledge coming out and expressing, what they knew about UAPs. So well, why now? Why are you getting us ready to accept this now? And the only thing that immediately pops to mind is we've been locked in our houses for a particular reason this past year and a half. Is there possibly a connection to the ET presence in and around the world and this contagion thing that where Steve, you're shaking your head. It's
I disagree with that theory too. I'll quickly just say my piece on that, and Steve can elaborate. But this disclosure process really started back in 2017, and there was no pandemic present at all. The To the Stars Academy was working with Luis Elizondo and the folks from the ATIP program, releasing this information to the public. This got through the New York Times. It was reported on CNN, all of these major news outlets around the world, which are the great information filters for the masses. And it hardly made a splash. People tuned right back into the Kardashians, UFC, baseball, football, what have you, that is the true distraction. These are the things that are not advancing us as a society. These are just things that are real distractions. And that's the sad part, the fact that we get acknowledgement from our powers that be, the largest military industrial complex in the world says we're not alone, and barely anybody cares, or they are so distrustful and paranoid these days because everything that's going on. I don't blame them, that they distrust even that information coming out. And to a certain degree, I'm kind of saying to you, yes, why now? I don't understand why disclosure is fully happening, and I don't think we will fully know until things unfold further. But the pandemic is real. It's not the plandemic. We all got, every country in the world's been dusted by this disgusting virus, and a lot of intelligent folks have known about this idea that we're super susceptible to viruses, very evolved viruses, to wiping out large amounts of our population. And the coronavirus is just the tip of the iceberg. There's stuff out there like encephalitis diseases that also come from bats. The name's escaping me right now, but this is like the true threat, because you can't even get a vaccination for some of these viruses that could infect the world like coronavirus did. So we're dealing with this pandemic the best we can, and I think there's something else that's going on that the military industrial complex is trying to stay ahead of. I don't know what it is, but there's a reason why they want disclosure now. Maybe it's because we're going to space anyways, and it's about time that we get out there, and before we're, you know, having Elon Musk sending commercial flights to colonize Mars, maybe the whole Earth needs to know about what's really out there in our own solar system. But this is speculation, and we won't really know until more of this disclosure unfolds.
Yeah, find out who lives in the hood with us. Now, Steve, you had mentioned earlier that you believe that these the ETs that are monitoring us are closer to us. They're not, you know, 200 light years away, because, you know, what would they want us for if they had the tech to get 200 light years? What do you think they want here? I mean, are they just altruistic and they're babysitting us, or do we have a resource they need, or, you know, why do they care?
Well, only the extraterrestrials can tell us that. That's the only way we're going to find out for sure. But based on everything that has been gathered, the evidence has been accumulating for all these decades, a lot of people are speculating on it. I am. So is Richard Dolan, mentioned earlier. By the way, I recommend people read everything he's done. I mean, everything, particularly the UFOs in the National Security State, Volume 1 and 2. I'm rereading Volume 1 right now, and everything else. He is a well-known guy, but he's about to become world famous pretty soon. But I think the best way to try to approach that question is to turn it around. Let's imagine that it's about 150 years from now. Let's imagine there's no ETs in our world at all, nothing, just us cruising along. About 150 years later, and we figure the workaround of relativity. In other words, you can't travel relativistically.
Sure.
I mean, you can, but it's crazy. But we figure the workaround. No big deal. So now we can go interstellar. So are we going to not say, oh, well, that's kind of cool, but I think we probably just stay home? No. We're going to build these craft. We're going to head on out into our galaxy and start looking around. And we will start with the closest planets. And at some point, we come across a planet that's got a biosphere. It's got life.
Yeah.
It's got whatever level of type of life, it's got life. Now, what do you think we're going to do next? Do you think we're going to just say, okay, put a pin in that, or head on back, right? And we just leave them alone? No. And again, it could be where the Earth was a million years ago. That biosphere is the most interesting, profound, new thing for human science to engage, period. And we're going and much to learn. The Lord knows what we could learn. Now, of course, you got to do it without killing yourself, right? I mean, you just can't cruise down, start eating the vegetables. But nevertheless, that is a massive scientific wonder. And so we would study it. Of course we would. So we will assume that ETs over these many, many millennia, going back as far as you want to go, different ETs, they want to study us. They're going to study the planet.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, so far so good. But then what happens if we come across a biosphere that has a sentient species? Sentience is kind of a threshold in evolution. It's not perfectly defined, but most people sort of get it. If you have very strong self-awareness and very high intelligence, you're sentient, it's a whole new ballgame. And when you add these things right here, anything is possible.
Yeah. Porpoises
are sentient. They're never going to build a spaceship. All right. We got it all. So you come across a biosphere that's got that. Well, first of all, let me just say this. As a human, if I'm part of that exploration and I see a planet that got sentient beings, I have a certain connection to that. These are sentient beings like we are. All right, there's potential for interaction. So the idea that you would engage the planet for that reason as well is perfectly understandable. So I believe the fundamental agenda is scientific research, which may go all the way up and including contact and what is called abduction. But the research is not confined to humans. It could be confined to any aspect of our biosphere. And secondly, the engagement is that a sentient species, if it reaches a certain level of technology, could sit at our lunch table in the cafeteria. But how do you do that? How do you bring that about? These are the two fundamental things, I believe, that you could ascribe to the agenda of the extraterrestrials. There could be other things. I mean, everything gets thrown out. They're here for our gold.
Yeah.
I laugh.
Why?
You realize there's an asteroid in our belt right now that has more gold than's been discovered on this planet going back forever? They don't need to come get the gold here. Let's go take that damn asteroid. As far as water is concerned, a lot of people don't understand how much water there is in the universe. I get it. It's okay. There's tons of water. It's not a problem.
It's hydrogen and oxygen. We can find these things from
Exactly.
suns.
There's really nothing we have here that they can't get anywhere they want, except the genetic structure of life. Because here's the simple thing to know. Aside from some panspermia and some sharing of things, which we think does happen, okay, we've evolved for 3 billion years. You know how many animals and other creatures had to die and then adapt and die and adapt? I mean, untold quadrillion times quadrillion times quadrillion over all these billions of years, and eventually the animals that we see today have evolved, including us. That's how long it took. Now, what do you think the odds are that another biosphere, say 100 light years away, that starts 3 billion years with the primordial soup, and goes through that whole process for 3 billion years and ends up creating your twin or anything like human? Zero. Absolutely zero. Okay? So that makes us special and unique, and we are being engaged along those lines as well. Now, I want to get back to something that Darcy said. He said it was crazy. You're going to think this is crazy. I'm going to make it less crazy for you. He talked about the fact that many contactees, and by the way, there have been millions of reports that have been delivered, about a million, they're literally archived, have talked about human-looking ETs. Literally. What, smarter maybe, telepathic, I don't know. They can play the piano at birth, whatever. They're human-looking, it could sit down at you at the Starbucks and you'd say, hi, where are you from? And that sounds pretty crazy, doesn't it? It's not so crazy. Think about it. ETs can come and go at will. ETs have been coming and going probably for as many thousands of years as you want to guess. It's not like they just showed up. And Ancient Aliens has kind of expanded that and made a great case for the last 10,000 years. But I assure you it didn't start then. So let's just go back 200,000 years. Homo sapiens sapiens were on a planet. What I mean by that, our species. Now, they might have let their hair grow and are not bathing often, but the point is if you could go back in time and grab one of them, you could bring them forward, or grab one of their babies, bring it forward in time into our world, give it a fine education, and it could go to MIT and get a PhD in astrophysics. Same species.
Right.
So you come down. It's 200,000 years ago. You think if you, for whatever purpose, wanted to take, I don't know, a couple thousand of those Homo sapiens sapiens and just leave, you think anybody's going to notice? No.
No one's going to write it down for sure.
And so it's very possible that aside from any other animals they could take at will, I mean, they take anything they want. The point is, aside that over the thousands of years going back, and to the length of our existence as Homo sapiens sapiens, it's very possible that not just one, but maybe one or more species has come and simply taken some fine Homo sapiens sapiens somewhere else. Now, I think one person put up on your thing there, they're here for lunch. Well, that's possible.
Well, you said
a lot of technology and a lot of way to go to get. Yeah, it's a long way to go and a lot of tech to have lunch. I don't think so. So so what if they did? And they took them to a place where they could exist.
Sure.
I mean, again, biospheres are very different, but they have the ability, I think, to address that. But whatever, they took them somewhere else. And the ones that they take, the adults that they took, well, they're adults and there's some limits there, but certainly they would be able to educate them a lot and improve. But the babies from those Homo sapiens taken, say, 200,000 years ago, they can educate them to a very profound level. So let's say they're doing that. So you got long ago, you've got human children getting the finest education you can imagine and growing up in that fashion, highly intelligent. But let's go further. What if, because we know they have enormous genetic capabilities, what if they also genetically modify these human children hundreds of thousands of years ago, not hundreds of thousands, 100,000 years ago, to give them more intelligence, telepathy, whatever you want, make them immune to virtually any disease you can imagine. In other words, just make them really cool. What they then have is a human evolved advanced version of us.
Yeah.
Somewhere else.
Technically extraterrestrial because not born on
Exactly.
Earth and existing outside of Earth. But what you're saying is they're us. They just migrated for
They're
a while.
an advanced version of us that benefited from hanging out in an extraterrestrial environment of some kind. Now let's take it one step further. The human race has gotten to the point where it's a global civilization. And we're ready, and we're a spacefaring civilization, and it's time to sit at the lunch table. That's a big deal. It's kind of like a cosmic bar mitzvah.
Yeah.
And we're heading towards that. We're heading towards disclosure. We're heading towards that process, open contact, and so forth. Would it shock you that a lot of these humans that exist elsewhere, that evolved elsewhere, might think it'd be kind of cool to come watch this happen, kind of turn up around this time?
Sure.
Okay. Hey,
yeah, that would be so curiosity and
not just curiosity. It's like your 50-year high school reunion. Well, that kind of is curiosity, but I think it's more than that, because disclosure and open leads to open contact. Open contact opens all possible doors, which means that some of these extraordinary human descendants from this planet evolved to whatever they are, but still able to sit down with you at lunch. You can't tell the difference. It would be time for them to come back and be with us. See what I'm saying?
You're talking the ending of Close Encounters of the Third Kind here.
A little bit. And why would that matter? Well, for one thing, they have this is their home planet. This is where this is their ancestry planet. So that's kind of cool.
But is it?
But this is a planet. This is a planet that now has to evolve and has to do things very soon, or it's going to have a problem. And so wouldn't it be cool if a X number of these kinds of humans, these evolved humans that have these additional skills and extra intelligence, could come back and hang out with us and help us?
Stephen, are you saying that this is what's going to happen?
I am saying that, and again, I am assessing, right? I assure you, I haven't gotten some secret coded message from the ET. I'm assessing. I could be completely wrong, but let's face it, everybody wants to think about it this way. Everybody wants to speculate because that's what we have. Maybe the government knows for sure. Well, they're not telling. So I'm going to speculate. Based on what we know about the contact events, what is being recorded and reported by thousands of contactees, based upon we know of the actions of the ETs themselves, what have you, and the fact that human type ETs have been reported. Okay, that's fact as far as I'm concerned. So now I'm trying to extrapolate from that fact. Why would a human ET or a human evolved, a human-like ET, what's what I'm trying to say? Why would an absolutely advanced Homo sapiens want to come here at all? They probably got it made out there. Okay, it's all good. Well, this is the ancestry planet. And would such humans be valuable to us? Oh, God, yes. Here's another example.
This is interesting, really interesting speculation, but I don't know, if any of it's true. That's the thing.
It's okay. But hey, look, at least maybe you can get a sci-fi novel out of it. Make some
possibility of experience.
Darcy.
We could make future Humalians season 1.
Yeah. So, but here is another a take on it. These stories turn up about once every month or so on my Facebook or on my stream. It's about the prodigy child, the one that's 9 years old and has already finished high school and is almost done with college. He's going to get his PhD at the age of 11. Or it's the piano prodigy, 7 years old. He's doing Chopin. He's playing Strauss.
Yeah, but well, are you saying this is like an abducted, like?
No. What I'm saying is
that's just natural selection, and there's one that rises above the rest quicker.
Well, natural selection, no, because just because he can play the piano at 7 doesn't mean he's going to live longer. The point is that
smarter.
These examples are of what the human is capable of at the top end. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody seizes on this and they really like it because they go, wow, you know, maybe my kid will be able to graduate from Harvard at 12, whatever. We know that the humans can be that smart. We know that they can be so talented they can play classical music at the age of 8.
So you're saying if there's a like human type race out there that's all like that, you're just trying to give us some context for possibly some humalians that are out there that are all incredibly advanced intelligently and so on and so forth.
Well, I get what Steve's saying, because he's like, you know, why would another race on another planet evolve to look exactly like humans?
They can't. It's impossible.
And yet we have human-looking aliens.
Right.
I think this ex-Terran theory is a viable.
What did you call it?
Ex-Terrans, you know, like expatriates.
Okay, that's a new word. I've never heard that. Did you just make that up?
I am a writer, sir. I make up words.
So you just made that up right now. You haven't been thinking about that prior to this show.
This will be the nickel I give you back for having used.
I will send you a quarter. That is amazing. You were good. Okay. Now I'm going to give you another take on this that I think you might appreciate. I'm going to make a statement which I think is true, but could be challenged. If you look at the evolution of human societies and civilization, particularly civilization, but let's go all the way back even 100,000 years. All right. And hunter-gatherers living in caves, very limited. You know what it was like. You've seen the film. All right. So we go from living in caves and crude drawings on the wall and little tribes to spacefaring humans in 200,000 years. How do we get there? One of the reasons we got to where we are is not because the human race just evolved to be advanced 2020 humans. No, not at all. We've already seen that, like, we got an average here and we got people up like that. What I'm saying is even 200,000 years ago, you got 1,000 Homo sapiens get born into the cave, and they're average, just basic. But one of them is a genius. One of them, for whatever reason, has that higher function that the human brain is capable of when the other ones don't. Now, we understand that we happen in our world. What I'm suggesting is this. The reason we have evolved is one genius at a time. In other words, you don't have to have the whole tribe be a genius. You just need one. And that's the one that starts figuring things out and says, don't eat that and don't eat that and do this. And then time goes by, you get another one. Eventually, as we move forward and become civilized and come together in large groups, this is 10,000 years ago, there's more than one genius turning up. And so you might have X number coming out in a particular generation. These minds are the ones that have helped bring along the average. I'm not trying to, I'm not demeaning the average human. I'm simply saying that is the way things are.
Well, and plus, so that's how your first genius teaches people. And,
exactly.
And, you know, like 30 generations from now, your normal person is as smart as the first genius.
Kind of, right. The genius teaches, other people teach, but no, the genius, and I've met a few in my life, let me tell you.
That's a cool analysis. I like that, RJ.
Like that
works. I mean, like, everybody gets caught up, right? Doesn't mean that.
Yeah, right.
You
don't need everybody to figure out the friggin' wheel. You just need one person to do it. One human. One. Now, let's take it to the present. I'm going to put out a couple of ideas here, which I'm going to be hitting really hard as we move to disclosure. And in case you were wondering, it's coming at us like a freight train. Okay. Look, there is no reason scientifically why, once we have enough command of the genetic sciences, which, as you know, we're really working at really hard.
We're crisping it all the time.
That at some point, every child born into this world could graduate from Harvard at 11. And I'll go even further than that. There is nothing in the laws of physics that says that we can't have a sufficient command of genetics, which is what we are, so that you can live 100 or 200 years and never even get a cold. I believe the extraterrestrials actually can do that. I believe that they can teach us that. And what this infusion of exterrans, I'm using it, baby. I'll try to give you credit. I swear to God.
You can have it.
Exterans provide is it's like a whole bunch of geniuses that are brought into the world to say, hey, let's pick up the pace here, people. Right? Let's pick up the pace. Now, these are not ridiculous assertions. These are not that far out there. I'd be happy to do a TED talk on it anytime. It is very possible. And why does it matter? Because as people are thinking about this century and how we know it's going to go completely to hell, and the earth is going to go to hell, and we're going to have global warming, the water's going to be up to our eyebrows, right? There's going to be nuclear wars and famine and destruction, and the usual shit's going to go on, and it's never going to end. I'm suggesting a reasonable theory that if things go the way they seem to be going, all of that will disappear. We will be thinking about this world in a totally different way and about extraordinary possibilities for us, courtesy of the extraterrestrials, with our, obviously, involvement, right? But without the extraterrestrial presence, without their engagement forcing disclosure, I can make a very powerful case, and I can get you 20 studies that back it up, that there is no chance in hell we get out of this century. The human race will be annihilated. It has no chance. This century is going to be, and is going to be, without something profound happening, a disaster. The living envying the dead.
Well, it's off to a good start.
Things that are going to go bad is so long, and one of them is nuclear war. And the nuclear weapons just get more powerful and often. And then when you get all the damn gain of function genetic research that's been going on in level 4 labs to come up with diseases that can kill thousands of people.
Oh yeah,
and we're doomed. Except the ET showed up en masse in 1947. So I'm trying to give a theory out there that people can look at and say, man, I want disclosure. I want to know if there are exterrans. I want to know if there could be an engagement. I want to know if we could get genetic technology. I want all of this to happen. And the only reason it hasn't happened so far is the United States government, along with its allies, UK, Canada, Australia, plus the authoritarian states, have said, you can't have that now. We're not ready for you to have that now.
Is the fact that they haven't, first of all, if they're advanced enough, they don't really need our government's permission to be shown. I mean, they could just land in the middle of Central Park in a flying saucer or whatever and get out and say, hey, this is us. Go get a camera.
Of course, we'd shoot them immediately, but go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think that's an accurate assessment.
But is the fact
we have a history of shooting at them. If you look into this, we have a long, deep history of shooting at invaders to our airspace, and that's definitely made them reluctant to behaving that way. I'm sure of that.
Plus, we definitely don't want them to shoot back.
The age-old debunker line is, well, if aliens were here, why wouldn't they just land on the White House lawn? I feature that in my
worst place to do
documentaries. Yeah, probably, but basically that's been asked so many times by debunkers in media like Philip J. Klass, Michael Shermer, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Bill Nye. They all share that same jokey question, and they say little green men and so on and so forth. But history is catching up now, and their jokes, like the joke's on them. If you Google Neil deGrasse Tyson, aliens and such, he's singing a totally different tune in the year 2021 than he was singing in 2017. In 2017, when the To the Stars Academy UFO videos were coming out that were apparently from the Pentagon, he was still poo-pooing it. He was saying it's ridiculous. These are just unidentified objects in the air. That doesn't determine that they're alien. They could be anything. And he's now in the media saying completely opposite that. He's saying, well, if they are here, this, that, and the other thing. And I think, he's taking it seriously. So
I didn't know that. I
Yeah.
wasn't paying attention. I thought he was still slow walking it. So looks like Neil deGrasse is getting ready to board the disclosure train finally. Took him a while.
This whole "why don't they land on the White House lawn" also is it's making the assumption that these aliens are of a godlike nature, and like you've said, Steve, they're probably much closer to us technologically and physically, and none of us would attempt to land on the White House lawn because bullets hurt, and there'd be a lot of them.
Yeah, there's an significant exopolitical conclusion that you can draw from that. Why don't they can land on the White House lawn or do whatever the hell they want, right? Independence Day, all right, the whole 9 yards.
Of course. Yeah.
The fact that they don't is important. One could infer that the reason they don't do that or park a 2-mile wide mothership over Washington is because it would disrupt. It would be destructive. It would be disruptive. It would be upsetting. It would not be a positive thing. And the fact that they haven't done it gives us a glimpse that maybe their intentions are fundamentally good.
Well,
right?
That was going to be my question. I mean, and I took the long way around getting to it, but is the fact that they are withholding their disclosure any sort of assumed evidence that they have this moral or ethical high ground? Because humanity, when we find new people, we subjugate them.
I know.
We put them to work.
Historically, we have done that, but there's tribes that live in, white folks. There, are tribes in Brazil that we haven't interacted with because we are going by a protocol now to not interfere with, people that don't want to be. If they want to come out of the forest and they want to join a town or society nearby, that's their choice. And that might be the sort of assessment here. But I'm just going to remind people that there's a long history of military involvement with this whole subject, and it involves cover-up. So if you acknowledge that fact, there must be something else at hand that maybe our own military powers that be are paranoid of how disruptive this might be to society. There's a fossil fuel economy out there that's massive, that's been running the countries and running the world for a long time. And I guarantee you, this is one of the major themes that's been running in this storyline for a long time. The Chevron that was shot down possibly in 1947, and the other craft that have been coming out here and buzzing around our airspace and making the F-18, F-17s, whatever, look like jokes in our own airspace, ping-ponging around and then flying off into space. They're not running on fossil fuels. So that's another sort of element to this whole story. And that's a possible reason why suppression has been so important for so long. It's because we're at a point where we rely on an economy to keep order with society. And if you introduce something like technologies that are being introduced by an extraterrestrial race, when they are, introduced to us at the same time, that's destabilizing to certain economies.
Yeah.
And this is a really old argument for why this hasn't been announced earlier in our history. And maybe we're at this point where we're destroying our planet so badly that it's actually in the vested interests of the military powers that be to start to transition off of this fossil fuel economy and introduce us to new concepts that's going to carry us out into space.
Yeah, and it's still really a trickle. I mean, the military, the Pentagon, witnesses coming out and saying, okay, yes, there are things in the air, we don't know what they are. Yes, there are things that come from outside this Earth. That's still metaphorically light years away from saying, and I'd like to welcome Bob to the stand here. Bob comes from a planet that's, 500,000 light years away.
No, it's not a trickle. It's turning into a flood. But look, I don't expect everybody to know that. Let me help.
Please do.
Listeners. Yeah. If you go to my website, paradigmresearchgroup.org, okay, Google my name, whatever, menu, right side, resources, scroll down that, go drop on down to Print Media Archive, punch through that, go to the main archive, Print Media Archive, go to 2017, scroll down to October 10. You will see 2 articles that are the first 2 articles about the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences, all right? And they're earmarked in red. Now start reading forward in time. Every earmarked in red article, all the way up to now, is about 750. And after you've read those articles, you'll realize this is not a trickle. This is a gathering flood, all right? And then I've got another section that's under issues. Go up to menu, issues, drop down To the Stars Academy, media, go there, 160 videos of their presentations, interviews, things like that, new stuff. I've got 50 more to add, and you watch them all, and you realize this is not a trickle. This is a flood. In fact, things are happening so fast now, I cannot keep up with them. I cannot log in fast enough, right? Because you see, I'm monitoring the worldwide press on this issue, English language. Anything goes into the internet about UFO, UAP, extraterrestrial, I get an alert. Okay, so I'm watching everything. That's my job. And so I'm telling you, and you watch everything, you realize, my God, we are literally almost there. Okay, the report is going to come out to the Intel Committee in mid-June.
Okay, what's your report?
This is the report requested by Marco Rubio in the Defense Intelligence Authorization Bill. Back, signed in November, 180-year deadline. It comes out in June. You will find lots of articles about this. It's generating all kinds of articles as well as expectations. Naturally, it's a perfect focus. It's great. All right. Expect at any time Marco Rubio or Mark Warner, it could be either one, to announce that the Senate Intel Committee is going to initiate a hearing on the UAP subject. It might come out, that announcement could come out before the report, but I'll be shocked if it doesn't come out very shortly after that report, which would put it the 3rd week of June, roughly. All right. Once that announcement comes out that they're going to hold that hearing, other committees are going to start vying to get hearings as well. There are scores of witnesses ready to testify. They're all military. All that's coming, right? And the other thing you're seeing is people in the government, high rank and station, who have known there's been ET presence as God knows when, but they didn't talk about it because it's not, can't do it, are going to be coming forward one after another. Woolsey, former CIA director, on board the train. Brennan, on board the train. Norquist, on board the train. Clapper just came out and said something. These are all former high-level guys, head of national security, the CEA, right? You're going to see more. Neil deGrasse Tyson is just one of many, many people who would know about this issue in science and politics and military that are going to be getting on the disclosure train, because pretty soon that train is leaving the station.
You mean
And
the CIA, right?
What now?
The CIA.
What's the CIA?
You said you said the CEA before?
I meant CIA. Yeah, the CEA is something totally different. Anyway, so the disclosure train will leave the station when disclosure happens. The announcement comes from President Biden. The train leaves and chugs into glory. You're either on that train, which has cars stretching back all the way 75 years. You're either on that train or you're on the platform. And so when that trains leave, if you're, say, Neil is still on the platform, or Seth Shostak is still on the platform, or anybody else, you're going to turn around, and what you're going to see is 10,000 reporters headed right for you. with some very hard questions for you to answer.
Yeah.
You didn't know? How did you miss it? Did you know and not tell us? What's going on? Why aren't you on the disclosure train?
Okay.
There's
So, Steve, what happens if? And I'm sorry, but
by the way,
what,
all of us are on the disclosure train. Just letting you know, you're good.
so what happens if the hearing, the documents come out? It's June. I have this cynical horror image in my head of Marco Rubio at a lectern, squatting down on the floor, holding aluminum foil like Jesse Marcel, and saying, "Oh, look, it was really this all this time." It's
be safe. I mean, what am I saying? Wait, chill out, my friend. That's not going to happen. Okay, Marco Rubio is going to do exactly the opposite. He's no fool. He wants to be president of the United States. Recently, the Pentagon. You see this little thing. The Pentagon deliberately turned over the process of getting the information to give to the Intel Committee to their AG, right? And why did they do that? Because the AG is an independent entity within the Pentagon. And so the AG, if the AG is the one that gathers this information, it takes the Pentagon essentially brass out of the picture so that people can't accuse them of manipulating the data. They're trying to create an independent result, right? So that they're less open to criticism. This is a very interesting maneuver. It's so interesting that when it happened, Luis Elizondo, who is, by the way, right now involved in all the things that are going down, as is Christopher Mellon, leading to the hearings, right? Which at this point includes getting that information from these agencies per Marco Rubio's request. Elizondo turned around and hired Danny Sheehan as his attorney. Now, Danny Sheehan is one of the best known legal activists in all of history. He's been in the middle of almost most of the major events of the 20th century, it seems. And he's known to be a progressive. He's a Catholic. And he's involved. He was involved in the pipeline issues. He's involved in the issues of Indian children being taken. He is a world famous political activist attorney. And his book, if you want to read it, is called People's Advocate. Right? He hires Danny Sheehan. Why? Because he is going to actively help to ensure that the information that's coming in the middle of June is not going to be frivolous. It's going to be serious, and it's going to be with a minimum amount of taint, right? And of course, the same applies to the ONI and the Navy.
No one likes taint.
Taint, yes, taint's a good. I like that word. And so what I'm saying is that while I had concerns as you did, everything I've seen since then says this report is substantive. Is it just break it wide open? No. But it will help provide additional support to the hearings that are coming. All right. It'll make it easier for the politicians to say, well, based on this, I think we need to have those hearings. And once those military witnesses get in front of those committees and start talking about the Nimitz case and the Roosevelt case and the nuclear weapons tampering cases ad infinitum, the truth embargo is over. It's just a matter of making the announcement. That's what's coming. I put it June, July. I like to see disclosure in August.
Now, Steve, you talk about these high-level people who are getting involved in everything that's happening, high-level events that they're all getting involved in.
Speaking up, yeah.
Yeah. Going back to this whole human-looking alien, human-looking ET kind of thing, the ex-Terran kind of thing, is there any thought to the fact that they're, not the fact that they're already here, because I think that's been something that people have already considered for a long time. Hey, they're among us. We get the ominous notice all the time, but that we have seen them and we know them by name, and that they're involved in the release of the truth embargo, because they're smart enough to be in these positions.
Go ahead, Darcy.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Just before we go, and say that everything that's interfaced with us in history is considered an ex-Terran. That's definitely the wrong way of observing this phenomenon, because, I'm going to throw out some names here. Again, this is going to sound crazy, but people believe that there's a race called the Pleiadians, and there's another race called the Syrians. and not like Syria out in the Middle East, but the Sirius star system.
Right.
And the Pleiades is another star system, and they apparently look. They don't look human. They look humanoid. You know, they have much bigger eyes. They have different proportions to their body. They're much taller and more slender, and you know, they have bigger heads, that type of thing. So, you know, people can just Google artistic renderings of these. If, in fact, there are races like that are interfacing with us that are human looking, like they're humanoid, but they're not human. They evolved differently, and they evolved thousands of years ahead of our current historical calendar. It's possible that they've had some hand in helping usher in disclosure. You never know. I mean, there's stories and themes that run through this whole subculture history that involve past presidents that have met with possible off-world civilizations. Eisenhower, there's a story. There's a story of Ronald Reagan meeting with an off-world, you know, culture. And I don't believe all of it, but I've heard of it, and I look into it, and I think about it, and I think about these craft that are being observed in these military videos that are being released to the public now. And I wonder if the military is trying to lock down our airspace even more, or if they are vying for some kind of disclosure that leads to open contact. I don't know if it's going to be this positive, you know, over the rainbow type scenario where
Age
they
of
come
Aquarius.
forward. Age of the Aquarius. This is the hippie culture that came out of the 1960s. They also infiltrated the UFO community. And there is a very large group of folks out there that will say to you that they will spiritually enlighten you and help you ascend to then be accepted by these spacefaring races. And I think that's complete garbage. Anytime you hear this type of stuff, it always leads to somebody wanting to have sex with you because they're a cult leader.
Yes.
And that's pretty much the human condition. We are motivated by our primitive instincts, right? And this phenomenon is real. There are, in my opinion, some kind of extraterrestrial races, maybe future us. There's all kinds of theories out there interacting with our planet. These UFOs are real. They're not ours. I don't think they are ours. Some of them possibly could be ours, but that's another conversation. But in terms of the vast amount of disinformation, misinformation, and stakeholders that have lots to gain in terms of this, the motive for this type of disclosure, that's what people have to be aware of. People have to be skeptical about what we're getting in terms of disclosure. They also have to be skeptical about the UFO community itself. The UFO community is its own worst enemy sometimes. There's a lot of people that have been interested in this phenomenon for a lot longer than me. And I have believed things in the past that I now look at and I feel like I need to screw my head on straight. But that's something like if disclosure happens, the information that's been released in the past that's still out there floating around, people are going to find online. And there's going to be camps that are heavily invested in this hoo-ha spiritualism, and there's going to be camps that are heavily invested in deep conspiracy, paranoia, and fear. And there's going to be camps that are backing the United States military, and that's also fear-based. You just have to take a look at that information that's out there from the past and what's coming out as we go forward. And you have to be very analytical and kind of roll with it. I think don't let fear be the major motivator here. And you know, fear is the greatest tool for motivating people.
Oh yeah.
But also don't let love be the major motivator, because that is the spiritual hoo-ha talking. That is the far, far other side of the coin that usually involves defrauding you of your money, making you join some new spiritual cult, and then your wife is like sleeping with this poor guy or this manipulative guy, and you don't want to go down that road either.
Right. The question came up in the chat that, assuming we get disclosure, what then? And you talk about not letting fear be the guide. I'm always reminded of the line in Men in Black that Tommy Lee Jones delivers. He's like, hey, well, we should just tell the people. People are smart. He's like, no, a person is smart. People are dumb, panicky animals, and you know it. Are we ready for that full stream of disclosure, Steve? I mean, if they turn on the fire hose, what next? Where do we go?
Well, disclosure is not a fire hose. It's a simple announcement. There's extraterrestrials here. That's it. Disclosure's over. But from the president of the United States, it has to come from a head of state. But once a head of state says that, that's it. We're in the post-disclosure world. It's not a fire hose. Now, what happens in the post-disclosure world? Well, I spent a lot of time thinking about that. Richard Dolan does. Bryce Zabel does. I know that Darcy does. A lot of people are thinking about it. A lot of people aren't. But it doesn't matter whether we're ready or not. It's coming. Since when did anybody go to the world's people and say, look, here's what's coming. Are you ready? If you're not, we'll wait. Right? It's like, did Einstein say, look, I think we need to get some sort of a referendum going here. I think I've figured out relativity, but I don't want to announce it unless the people are ready for it. Did the government come to say, look, you ready for a war in Southeast Asia? We're thinking about going there. We want to really kick some serious ass. Are you ready for that? Are you okay? No. It's not the way the world works. Disclosure is inevitable, always has been. The government has kept it off as long as it could. That's now ending. And so we're going to get it. Are we ready? Yeah, I think we're quite ready. Not everybody, but the world's population? Yeah. Do you know how many movies have been made about extraterrestrials since 1951? Do you know how much money they've made? Do you know how many television shows, television series, how many books have been written?
Don't even get me going on my theory about how many of them have been shaped by the extraterrestrials.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, that doesn't matter. I mean, the world has been bathed in extraterrestrial content for most of 70 years, really. The first ET movie was, I think, 51. And then, of course, there's the research that's been done and the actual direct engagement documentaries.
Yeah, and events that have happened in history that are based off of many things in Hollywood and television. I mean, you said 1951, right?
Yeah, I think that was the first movie.
That was the first movie. I think it's Earth versus Flying Saucers. And that whole movie is based off of Donald Kehoe's book writing about the UFO wave in the 1940s, the late 1940s, post first nuclear bombs being tested. And Donald Kehoe didn't want his name attached to the movie once he realized that Hollywood had made a fictional, complete garbage interpretation of his book. He was approached. He thought that they were making a documentary. That's what they had sold him on. But they ended up making Earth versus Flying Saucers. So this has gone down in history forever. And you mentioned the famous Men in Black movie with Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones. Men in Black is another example of fictionalizing the UFO cover-up that has been happening since
Yeah.
1947.
Yeah.
Men in Black are a real piece of the phenomenon. And what that is fear and subversion of the story from reaching the public. They're not they're not a funny duo of, you know, government secret black op agents that are going around cracking jokes and shooting at aliens with their, you know, high-tech laser guns.
And those
They're
aliens. And those aliens, I think,
Yes.
in post-disclosure, in open contact, one of the first things the ETs are going to say, look, we need to talk about the aliens in Men in Black series. I mean, are you kidding me? Really? You really think we're that weird? Okay. You really think things can evolve to that? I mean, come on, guys.
It's Disney. Anyways, you have a point there, RJ. And the whole thing is that Hollywood will take reality many times more than often, and they will write it into fiction. And therefore, it just hits home so much more with many people around the world. And, you know, a really good book. I'm speaking with this guy on May 29th. I'm actually starting up a podcast called The Esoteric Review. And what we do in this podcast is we will review films and TV shows and pop culture media and show that there's certain things that have happened in history that are factual that back this science fiction that's being presented in front of you. A really interesting character that's written about this and proven this time over time with the history of Hollywood science fiction productions is Robbie Graham. He'll be the first guy we're speaking to. Robbie Graham wrote Silver Screen UFOs. So I recommend people check out his book too. Silver Screen UFOs is all about the history. That example with Donald Kehoe is just the tip of the iceberg. And he's going to be our first guest on our podcast. I recommend you check out his book, and it will show you all of these fictionalizations of things that have actually happened in history in terms of the UFO subject too. So, yeah, back to you, Stephen. Take it away.
This is, you know, non-trivial. You don't have to be working for the Pentagon to know there's extraterrestrials here. I just read the books. I mean, hell, I was reviewing Keogh's book, and I was also I'm reading Richard Dolan's first volume, UFOs, National Security State 47 on. You wouldn't believe what was going on back then. I mean, the reports that were being published and out, it was obvious it was extraterrestrial. Right then. Keogh did everything he could to crack the truth embargo open. He tried to get hearings several times. He always shut down. He formed NICAP. NICAP was driving the government crazy. NICAP had a former CIA director on the board, Hillenkotter. Hillenkotter was even trying to end the truth embargo, it turns out. I didn't realize how positive he had gotten. Ultimately, he stepped back, but that was early 1950s, you know? And so well, look, let me say this. We don't ultimately know. We don't know yet how it's all going to go, but it's going to go. And you can't assess something that doesn't exist. So if people think there's no ETs here, what's to assess? When the government starts making the announcement, it comes out. We have all the tools. You know, we got computers and mouses and phones and screens and everything to pay very close attention.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we will. And we will assess everything the government says and does.
So June is going to be a very big month for
this month's going to be pretty big. I mean, given what's happening, and hopefully we will have the ability to address government efforts to turn this thing dark inappropriately, or to try to build an exaggerated threat scenario. No guarantees, but I'll say this: I assure you, the number of people who will be closely watching this as it unfolds, is going to be in the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions. And so, like, if you want to pull something, it's like trying to pull a prank on somebody with 150 million, 200 million watching. Now that's not going to happen. So I'm optimistic in that regard, but there are no guarantees. And something I wanted to get back to a little earlier, that's kind of something this Exterran thing, you got me going on this Exterran thing. It's your fault, RJ.
Go with God.
Okay, so yeah, there have been reports of these humanoids. Okay, in other words, they look pretty human, but the eyes are a little here, a little there. But they're pretty close, right? What are the chances of one of those evolving on a separate planet? 0. Can't happen. Okay, so then what's going on, Steve? I mean, you say that can't happen, then it's happening. I've seen them, right? What's going on? And by the way, a very significant exopolitical question to be answered, ultimately, hopefully sooner than later, is yes, have absolutely human-looking extraterrestrials been here, not just observers, but actually getting involved in things we do, such as politics or anything else? I don't think so, but it needs to be looked at, okay? And so, to make my point, I'm going to say this. At this point, we believe that the most complicated thing in the universe is the human brain. That's pretty much a consensus. Except, of course, there's other brains. And so actually the most complicated thing in the universe is the most complicated brain.
Right.
Okay, wherever the hell that is, right? And the absolute most complicated science in the universe as we know is genetics. Nothing is more complicated than that.
And there's only 4 triggers, so
yeah, genetics. And so the ETs have made it clear that they're the masters of genetics based upon contactee reports. Genetics is a huge thing with them, and they're very good at it. Okay, fine. So let's go back to my original statement. They took humans off planet. They evolved into basically an Exterran group that looked exactly like us, but substantially improved. Fine. All right. But the ETs are involved in more than just that. They're also involved in hybridization, as we are. We're big on hybridization, and we're going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. You've even got people out there right now in some labs, I think one's in science, that is trying to make a human-monkey hybrid, okay?
Yes.
This is not a good thing. It is a bad thing, but and the United States, I wouldn't put it past us, which is why I'm going to be pressing very hard that we have a secretary of technology and science ethics at the cabinet level as soon as possible, all right? So, but again, however we're screwing it up, the ETs, I think they can do this. And so I think in addition to what they did was they took humans, they did what we were talking about to create essentially advanced, perfectly human looking. They also did hybridization. They hybridized humans that they have taken from here with other entities. And these have created human-like beings. And some of those have turned up. Part human, but not just looking like humans. And they would be called the humanoids, right? Or exterranoids or whatever. You may say, again, this is science fiction. Actually, it's a logical extrapolation of what we already know. It's exactly what you would expect. Now, at some point, the human race, assuming it survives, which I give it without disclosure, I give it maybe a 1% chance. With disclosure, I think the century is going to be fantastic. But as our science evolves, you know what we're going to do? We're going to do genetic work that is going to increase the intelligence of babies. We're going to do genetic work that enhances our eyesight and other features. Hopefully we won't get carried away and decide some humans need to have claws. I don't know, but it'll be along those lines. You can guarantee it. We will do hybridization and genetic technology to make us more immune to disease so that we can live longer. All of that is coming, and we will do hybridization. But
we need to clean up this planet first, though.
I'm afraid that the planet's still going to be dirty by the time that
maybe we can create some massive vacuum cleaners to clean up the Pacific garbage patch and stop deforestation and such. I think one of the major themes that runs through this whole conspiracy theory realm is that there are certain species that might be trying to interface with us that are concerned for our future. And
I agree.
And the climate issue, which some people ignore and completely discount and don't agree even has any legs to stand on, is smashing us in the face, smashing our continental coasts with higher winds and, you know, more destructive forces every year that goes on now. The oceans are heating up. Our, you know, basically our sea life is dying off. Our ocean levels are rising. The forests are being destroyed. They're, you know, spontaneously combusting practically because of overheating and just a little too much heat, spark, what have you. And we got massive forest fires taking out most of California in the summer. So if there is a intelligent race that has some empathy and is watching everything happen down here on planet Earth, they might be interested in helping us out and getting us through this really tough time. Because, I mean, I would, if I see somebody messing up and you know, needs some kind of help, I try. That's just me. Some people laugh and they carry on their merry way. I would like to think that this is something that's happening, and there are stories and anecdotes of this type of message being communicated to certain experiencers and contactees throughout history. Some of my documentaries cover this type of theory, but I think that's like a good one. I don't know if the Pentagon has an interest in escalating this disclosure to the point that we are having open contact, which is to the benefit of mankind. I think disclosure, if it goes the right way, it will benefit mankind. I'm positive that if it goes the right way, it will be for our best interest, because it's just amazing. It's what a wondrous time to live in, that you find out, you know, we're not alone, and that there's other folks out there that may not look like us and may not act exactly like us, but they're interested in us and they want to see us succeed. That's a hugely hopeful time. With the things that are going on in the Middle East right now, our environment, you know, COVID-19 decimating the world and grinding everything to a halt as we know it, I think we could use a little hopefulness to go around. And I think disclosure could lead to some version of hopefulness.
Yeah.
If it goes the right way. If it goes the way that doesn't involve us locking down the planet and having the military chasing every UFO with some even more state-of-the-art UFO that they've designed, and that they're coming to the public and saying, guess what, guys? We're here to protect you once again. We wanted to unveil our new UFO exploder. You know, the B-20 bomber that is, you know, completely invisible to the human eye and can chase the Tic Tac UFOs right back to where they came from. That's not the type of disclosure that I hope manifests out of this, but it's a possibility.
Yeah, I don't know that we would that I would hope for them to step in loco parentis and say, okay, look, you guys are messing up. We're going to help you out here. I would think we would help ourselves by the sheer announcement that they exist, just so we could say, oh, we have more to live for than just this mud ball. Maybe we should ensure that we're sticking around a little bit longer, because now we have people, you know, more to learn and more cultures to exchange with.
For sure.
Well, I talk about that. That's valid. Let me use an analogy that I think people can connect with. By the way, in terms of the right disclosure, I'm totally down with that. And if the administration needs any help in getting right disclosure, I just want to remind them one more time that my office is just 2 blocks away. So I'm just right over here. Send somebody over. Happy to come back and chat. Let's think about it this way. Not everybody's experienced this in their life, but I think most people have. You're in a point in your life with what you're facing, what's coming at you is simply more than you can deal with. You just don't have the resources. You don't have the intelligence. You don't have the connections. The issues are overwhelming. There's more than one. There's 8, 9, 10, and you simply, I can't deal with it.
Yeah,
and then you have to deal with that. I mean, somehow you deal with it, right? But and a lot of people, that's the end for them. It's over. Okay, it can happen to a person. It can happen to a civilization. And so I would suggest that if someone were to really read the studies about what the CIA and the DoD and other organizations are projecting for this century, and you look out at all the tipping points, believe me, global warming and rising sea levels is one of a very long list of stuff. And you look out at this century, what you see is that this wonderful civilization of ours, which has a lot of pluses and so forth, what's coming at us, we can't deal with it. It's beyond our capabilities. This idea that we can handle anything, that's an illusion. If a Everest-sized meteor was heading for this planet like it did 60 million years ago, I assure you, we can't deal with it.
No.
Okay? It's lights out. It's over. So there are limits to what even a civilization can cope with. And partially because of our actions and policies and choices or whatever the hell you want to list, what is coming at us, we can't deal with it. And so the outcome is going to be pretty bad. So does it shock you that a sentient or one or more sentient species who are aware of us and have been for a long time might say, you really can't handle this, guys. So we're going to have to step in and help you out.
That's
in whatever way they
can.
choose. So that's an analogy I think that people can maybe relate to.
Yeah. And that's assuming that they actually can. I mean, if their technology is just close enough to ours, but advanced enough that they can get here, well, all they've done is, travel faster. They might not have, they're like, yeah, we can get here, guys, but we don't have magic asteroid zapping guns or atmosphere replacers or anything like that. We just got here.
Well,
We're
that's possible.
Like
there's a number of species here, and I assure you, I say they're close. I'm not meaning they're 50 years ahead. Trust me, they're advanced. Okay, very, very advanced, and if they can help us in a lot of ways, if that can happen. Now, what it takes for that to happen is interesting. I won't go into that because it's a whole nother long thing, and I'm not going to go there. I'm simply saying that if you're looking for the reason why they show up in 47 en masse and start really getting, how would you say, active, I assure you that the 2 atom bombs that were dropped in Japan and the very beginning of what we call the Cold War now is just one of a long list of things that we are not dealing with and may not be able to deal with. All right, we're over our head. Yeah, it's like I once went to a philosophy lecture at the University of California, San Diego. I was trying to get some exposure, maybe get back to school because my life was terrible. And I went to this philosophy lecture. It was like an after meeting, and I sat down. I did not understand a single word that was said in that dialogue. There's like 2 or 3 people. They went on. I didn't understand a damn thing. I simply did not have the capacity, the history, the knowledge to understand what these nice philosophers were talking about. I get that. And I'm saying, well, Steve, if being able to understand those philosophy teachers in that lecture is absolutely critical to your existence, meaning if you don't understand them, you're going to die, I'm a dead man. That's the analogy I'm trying to get across. Yeah. The human race can't overcome everything, and it's created so many problems that it's exceeded its capacity. And so people go on year after year after year. Why is there this problem in Palestine and Israel? It's been going on for 2,000 years. It could go on for another 1,000, but we won't have that kind of time. And why is there a genocide in Yemen? Why are children dying by the hundreds of thousands? We just can't deal with it. right? Why are we still building new nuclear weapons? Because we have outstripped our capability to do things as a civilization that will get us forward and not destroy us. We're over our head, undermanned, okay? And so the ETs happen to be here. I'm hoping to God that disclosure.
I think we're overmanned. That's why the planet's falling apart.
Well, there's that too. Yeah, the population thing. Nope. What? I mean, we had plenty of time to figure out some birth control, and then when we finally got some birth control, you had huge numbers of people rise up and say, it's verboten. You can't use birth control because we need the more people, whatever. You know, and I'm going, oh God. And the ETs are probably looking down there and going, hey, we haven't had an overpopulation problem in 40,000 years. So I'm just saying.
They've got all the space now.
Think of it that way. So, you know, you got, when people talk about global warming, they say, how in the hell are we going to deal with that? We can't deal with that. Carbon footprints. We're going to cut the emissions down. My God, we've got a couple of billion people out there barely have a place to live.
Well, right? One of the popular, theories is that we're just a cosmic truck stop, and maybe all of this conspiracy theory is based off of human manifestations of what we think is interacting with us. There are UFOs, there are intelligent races coming to our planet, but none of them have actually stopped to really interface with us. Many of them just come, exploit, and then take off because they're like, wow, these guys are really far behind and stupid and no thanks. That's another theory.
So it's like stopping to get gas in Lower Alabama.
I don't disagree.
Something. Maybe the reason why U.S. Nimitz and all these seafaring military operations are seeing them is because they're not even coming to land most of the time. They're going to the ocean. They're grabbing some material from the ocean, and then they're back into space. There's that theory. Maybe when we get disclosure, it'll be based off of that theory that there's been no interaction with us, even though many people have theorized that presidents have had interaction and so on and so forth. It's not proven. But that's just a fictionalization of these, intelligences that are coming here that really have no interest in us, don't care about us, and are popping down to our ocean to take a quick sip and leave. Who knows?
My biggest nightmare that keeps me awake occasionally is that when disclosure does take place and the world announces to itself that the ETs are real in here, the ETs just kind of put out a little announcement. I don't know, maybe they put it up on Facebook and say, okay, now that you finally disclosed, is great, but of course now we can't really abduct people anymore. That's going to be very awkward. So we're gone. We're leaving. It's been great. Thanks for all the fish. Maybe some of you get that reference.
Yes, I do.
And they're gone and say, hey, we hope things work out for you, right? But you've disclosed. Okay, great. We're gone. We got a whole lot of cool things to do, and we just hope that century goes well for you. That keeps me up at night. But
that could be a good thing. That could be good because they could say, we're here. Now you know it. See you when you figure out how to get to us. And now we've got something working.
Yeah, but we won't get there. We'll basically be going to turn into a pile of radioactive ash. But here's the counter to that, right? Things that make me think we're not a truck stop. The turning off of our nuclear weapons over and over again. Why do you care? If you're just a truck stop, why are you turning off nuclear weapons? Use them, don't use them. They don't give a crap, right? And then the crop circles. The crop circles. If your intent is not relatively optimistic and so forth, if there's not a future here, if we're not going to actually get to that lunch table, why do you put crop circles down? Just to screw around? What should I do today? Well, we've got the genetic stuff out of the way. We got the ship fueled. Let's go put a couple of crop circles down in the UK. They love that stuff, right? No. So again, there's a lot there. If you look at the whole picture, which is what I do, I'm not a researcher. I don't go deep into some case now. I look at as big a picture as I can. And in that picture is crop circles. Darcy, of course, is quite familiar with it. The message I'm getting there is, hey, okay, we're not going to eat you, right? There's a plan here. There's some things going to happen. Hopefully you'll respond. And that's why I remain optimistic. And there's some other things like that. Some of the contactees have actually had ETs tell them flat out what their intentions are. Obviously, you can't get carried away with that. I mean, it's secondhand. But some of these accounts corroborate a little bit. But of course, the ETs can tell you what you want. I mean, hell, they could say that just to make you feel better, right? Before they serve you up with an apple in your mouth. I don't know. But there is a lot of stuff out there that you can draw upon. Now, the government's not putting that out. They're not letting us know that. The media doesn't give it the kind of coverage that would allow this. But in the books and in the work that the citizen science researchers are doing, that material is there. And this is something else that's very important. I mentioned this earlier, but I didn't finish. You don't have to be a CIA guy working on a USAP to know there's ETs here. Any intelligent person can go read the books and the evidence that's out there in the public domain and figure it out. What does that mean? It means that plenty of people in government, in our military, in our agencies, have been aware personally there's an ET presence most of their life. Okay, so are they acting on it? No, it's not their job. And under the embargo, it would be very poor. So all of those people, because of the developments that are taking place, are starting to get the ability to open up. And I've been hearing this. I've been hearing this from people saying, man, I was at this thing and I'm talking to the people and suddenly my friend Joe is suddenly talking about ETs. That guy never uttered a thing about it in his life. Next thing you know, he said, oh yeah, I had a sighting when I was a teenager. He said, you never mentioned it before. And I'll tell you something else that's going on. If you listen real carefully, you might hear the gears turning, starting to turn faster and faster and faster as executives and producers and directors and studio owners from one end of Hollywood to the other are starting to figure out how they're going to start cranking out projects on this subject. I know this firsthand, all right? Believe me, you're going to see bidding wars. You're going to see stuff coming out, boom, bam, boom. I know of one project that plans on, I can't say that. Let's just say the gears are turning, okay? And so this trickle, it's already a flood. It's about to become a geyser, and eventually it's going to become a tsunami. Remember, this is and will be the most profound event in human history, observed and participated in by not a couple of 100,000 people, but 7 billion people. Nobody on this planet alive today has any experience with something like that. It is beyond our experience. It's beyond our ability even to understand it. All we can do is live through it and hope for the best and enjoy it. But this is the Renaissance and all the major religious events you can imagine, and the Reformation, you name it, take them all, put them into a package. This is bigger than that.
RJ, what's your interest in this subject? Like, are you a believer in this type of stuff, or do you think it's just fun pop culture?
Well, I think it's both. I mean, I used to take the clippings and we talked about how the UFO phenomenon got turned into something you could pile and poo-poo on, because where did it come out at? You saw it in the World Weekly News. You'd see, Dr. J. Allen Hynek would be quoted, but he'd be quoted alongside articles about, the rat-faced boy seen in, New Mexico again or something. But as a believer and as a Christian believer, I look at it and I'm thinking, the universe is huge. God's not somebody to waste space. Why would there only be this little pinprick of interest to him? It'd be like, no, he's a creative guy. He'd be going out and making stuff elsewhere as well. And I think that even biblically that holds up. Ezekiel saw the wheel, and we've got the reports of we got the stories of the Nephilim. and how that translates out into, ET visitations, basically. So I have not had an encounter. I have not seen an encounter. I have not seen a UFO, a light in the sky that, I looked at and could not explain. I live here in the top of an Ozark mountain in northwestern Arkansas. I have not seen a hairy Bigfoot. So, I'm more of Fox Mulder. It's like, I want to believe. Too many people have reported things for it to be. We can't have that many people suffering hallucinations of the same thing all over the place. So there's got to be some sort of credibility to it.
RJ, you said that you're a religious man, spiritual man.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the works of L.A. Marzulli?
No.
Okay. Let me commend to you the Watcher series he made with Rick Smith, who passed recently, sadly enough. L.A. Marzulli is a very religious man who has approached this issue from that perspective, but in a very sophisticated way. And he and Rick created a series called The Watchers. So L.A., that's his initials, L.A. Marzulli, if you check him out. He's got an IMDb page. I think you'll find his work very interesting to you because, again, he is coming at it as a Christian religious man and trying to interpret in that way. So that's cool.
Well, C.S. Lewis wrote, Beyond Narnia, he wrote the Paralandra series, which was about alien life and alien planets, and tying it to his Christian faith. So I don't think that the idea of ET is in conflict with Christianity. In fact, I think it lines up with it perfectly.
Yeah. The Pope came forward in, I think, 8 years ago and said that if we find intelligent life out there, God created them too, and they are considered our space brothers. Something to that. It wasn't the Pope; it was one of his cardinals. But like when the
Corrado
church,
Balducci.
Yeah, there you go. So when you see the Catholic Church doing that, and they, wouldn't just waste announcements like that to the public unless they actually have some kind of inside information that maybe we should be on board with this type of thing, that gives me pause. I think that's an interesting thing that happens. And yeah, I agree with your summation. Everybody can have spirituality. And before I was ragging on cult leaders that are trying to attract, that's
Heaven's Gate people and stuff.
Yeah. The leader of that cult had his penis cut off, and some of his followers did the same thing. And he said, this is part of the path to ascension, until they drank the Kool-Aid and died. Yeah. This is some wacky stuff. People will do crazy things when they find hope in really strange places. I think some of the religion that's out there is not that bad. It has some very important aspects to it that help us resist our innate desires and instincts to do bad things, and maybe bad things are considered evil. It's possible.
There's a whole show we could do. We've been sitting here talking about the military and political aspects of the truth embargo. Mm-hmm. There's a whole other show to be done here on the impact on religions. Yeah, with the reveal of alien life and extraterrestrial visitors being a real thing. Because now it can go either way. It can be like, yes, science, there's no spiritual beings. It's always been this. Or it could be like, isn't God great? He's made even more people. And what are their interpretations, and the proselytization that would go on in both directions if the ETs had their own religious beliefs. Yeah,
there's a possibility that extraterrestrials believe in God too. They have a different interpretation, but they believe in a higher power that, is in the universe, right? We won't know until disclosure happens. And there's people that there's some camps out there that do believe that's a thing.
Yeah, I write science fiction, and of a sort. And I've got, this one piece that has been sitting on the shelf waiting for me to finish, because I always thought about, if aliens could get here, if they've got that technology, what do we have to offer them? Well, we've got nothing, because like Steve said, the gold and water and stuff they can get anywhere else in the universe in plenty. So I likened it to sort of like, I brought it back down to just an earthly level. We have, cultures on Earth that are backward and technologically not advanced at all, or technologically barren. And well, who goes to visit those people? Missionaries, Peace Corps. So they go to proselytize and to teach and make their lives better. So my thought was that, when the first flying saucer lands in the middle of Central Park, their first words aren't "take me to your leader," but more like, have you considered having, Jesus Christus as your personal savior, and just be here to spread their religion? Because the only ones who would be interested would be the religious members of their race.
It's possible. It's possible. That's a very interesting, I've never heard that before, but it's very possible.
It's a story plot.
Yeah, I get it.
Ray Bradbury wrote a really cool short story that I read back when I was a teenager, and it had something to do with that type of thing. There was a Earth astronaut. This is far, far in the future, and he had figured out how to track God in his different manifestations, and God was visiting all these different planets. And this guy was chasing God. He was going to all the same planets, but was showing up late, and it was really driving him crazy because he wanted to have that face to face. But through speaking to these different civilizations that had just had that visit, their Jesus Christ moment or something, he was learning about God personally through those experiences. And that was like kind of the moral of the story. Maybe you don't have to meet God yourself. You can just meet those that, have had the experience, so on and so forth. That's a really interesting theory. And many people that, are researching this phenomenon are spiritual people. They are not nihilists that believe in nothing but aliens and this like chaos system that runs the universe. Many folks, even Attorney General Paul Hellyer, who is the former defense minister in Canada under the former Trudeau government, not my current prime minister, but his father when he ran the country back in the 60s. Yeah. Attorney General Paul Hellyer believes that we are being visited, and we have been visited, and that the governments of the world have been keeping a tight lid on it. And he had some insider information, being in the position of power that he was in the government, and many people that he could pry on this subject in Canada, for example, in our military industrial complex. And he apparently got many answers that proved to him that this thing is happening. And I'll just drop that he's a deeply religious man. He's a very Christian man. So, it doesn't have to be a this or us or them type of situation when disclosure comes out. Like, everybody can exist.
Yeah.
Everybody can feel comfortable with this new reality. It doesn't mean everybody will. A lot of people will reject it, and a lot of people don't give a crap about this already. Like I said, 2017, that should have been a huge splash in the media. That should have caused waves around the world, in my opinion. For people like me, it was an important event, and the stuff that we're getting even now, with more releases like pyramids flying over the destroyers in the Pacific and stuff like that. These are splashes to me. These are huge pieces of information. But for a lot of people in the world, they could care less.
Sure.
And they just want to go back to what makes them comfortable. And,
Yeah.
and that is not really advancing us as a civilization. But let me just say this last thing when I go back to, you were saying, for example, earlier in this show, like, how come this isn't happening all around the world and we're not hearing about it from other governments like we are from the United States recently? Well, John Greenwald, who runs a massive database of documentation that's been extracted in many different ways through Freedom of Information Acts and such with the United States and so on. He has a website called the Black Vault, and it's a repository of all this type of information. These are like redacted documents and so on and so forth that have come from releases, and many different types of releases, CIA, FBI, whatever, all the different lettered agencies you can think of. But he went to Canada because he had an inkling that the Canadians had some information in their military regarding the UFO issue. And he did a not a Freedom of Information Act, but a Canadian version, which I think is like freedom of the press or something like that. And he requested documents that could come from NORAD. Now, NORAD is a cooperation of our two airspaces, the United States and Canada's.
Yeah.
It's a united airspace act to protect our collective borders from adversaries and so on and so forth in our airspace. And when he went and did this request, in I think it was 2001, or was it 2004? But you can Google this. He got documents that affirmed that there is UFO activity happening over top of Canadian airspace. And this is the type of stuff that Attorney General Paul Hellyer would have been notified of and had access to through friends and such that he had in the government even after he left his post. And many other military, if you look at the 60 Minutes interview, these people have encounters every day for years on end when they're in their state-of-the-art aircraft flying around in the airspace protecting our borders. And many of them have them on their own individually. They don't have a crew. They don't have like other pilots or other flight organized squadrons. Some of them see them on their own, and they fear to ever mention this because they would be scrutinized and labeled loonies, because our current paradigm, our current accepted truth in the world is these things do not exist. And that is the real sad fact about our planet. We are so far behind on this. If 1947 came around and the Roswell, New Mexico crash happened, and that first article that appeared in the paper was the only article and was the truth that was announced from that moment, that we've recovered a crash craft that's not ours, possibly extraterrestrial, so on and so forth. And the American military did not come forward and say, actually, this was a weather balloon, our mistake. This is not a crash craft. If we had altered history and that was the accepted truth from 1947 till now, I believe we would be a completely different people.
Oh, yeah.
Because we would be allowed to do certain things. We would have access to certain technologies. We would be allowed to have the proper truth that we deserve. And it would take us to a different, it would take us to a more peaceful path, I hope. and it would allow us to already be colonizing other planets in our solar system, maybe moons, whatever. We're looking at doing that on Mars now, but there's so much work to be done there that's like, it seems almost impossible to comprehend how we would live there. We'd have to be living in like bubble atmospheres the whole time, because as people may note, Mars does not have the same metallic core ours has, and through our magnetosphere, that's how we have an atmosphere that doesn't spin off into space with our clouds, you know?
Right.
And Mars does not have that. If there's some kind of cloud formations that form, they eventually escape into space. So you can't terraform that the way that we think we could in Hollywood movies. We need to have a magnetosphere there to protect that atmosphere that we build. That's going to take a lot of work. How you do that, I can't even comprehend. But I think if we are planning to be a spacefaring race that really is colonizing things other than our planet, and we really do have to focus on that because we've over-colonized this planet, we need these truths and we need different technologies to help us get to that place. And we're nowhere near that truth now. We don't have the technology. So maybe disclosure will take us to that place, will get us there quicker. But who knows? There's so many scenarios that could go down with this disclosure that just don't pan out in a hopeful and peaceful way.
We'll all be watching very closely. Steve, before the show started, you asked how long we go on, and I told you usually about an hour. This is what happens when the discussion gets good.
I hope that your listeners and your viewers enjoy it. It's been a long session, but a good one. I want to just mention this about religion because I like talking about religion.
Okay.
And I'm a secular man. Is it after one of the things Corrado Balducci pointed out was that if in fact there's other civilizations, then God's creation is even that much greater. Okay, pretty straightforward. After he died, the spokesperson on this issue for the Vatican became Jose Gabriel Funes, who was their head astronomer. And I think it was there was one other person that has spoken out, but he or one other put out a statement that the Catholic Church would baptize extraterrestrials if they were here.
Oh.
If they were here, they wanted
nice
to be baptized, we'll baptize you, okay? They may not want to be, right? Don't know, but that was interesting. The Catholic Church is way ahead of this issue because the Catholic Church has known about ETs for a very, very long time. And people say, well, what do you mean, Steve? How would they have known? If you look at the religions of the world, there's only one major religion that has the confession. Only one, all right? That's the Catholic Church. And what is the confession? The confession is built in to the faith that you learn from birth, is that you go to a priest on a regular basis to account for the sins and to try to find some redemption, forgiveness, what have you. And you're given some penance to do or something like that. And it's a tradition. But it's more powerful than just getting a little penance. The confession is absolutely private, right? Secret. And it's acknowledged that way in most of the nations of the world as legally binding. A priest cannot be forced to tell about a confession. So what that means is over these many centuries, any contact events that were taking place between ETs and humans, and I don't have any reason to believe they just started in 1970 with Whitley Strieber's book. I think they've been going on quite a while. How do you think someone in the 16th century would respond to that? I mean, my God.
Visited by a demon.
Demon, devil, whatever. Terribly troubled. And who would they tell? They'd tell their priest. And so I believe the Catholic priests were getting information and reports about this kind of stuff from parishioners for a very long time. And it was just taken straight up to to the Vatican, and that's it, right? Right? Say anything. And so I think because of that, they became aware early on. I'm not saying right away. So the Catholic Church is known from the confessionals that something was interacting with humans, and I think at some point they figured out that this was not devils, it was non-humans. Okay,
That's a cool script there, RJ.
There's another script for you. Yeah,
I like it. Hope Dan Brown wasn't listening.
yeah. And so just to close out, so the Catholic Church is there. All right. Most of the other religions, there are a few religions that are not quite there. And one of the things that bothers me is that religion has been used as a stick by the truth embargo, by governments, to keep disclosure under control by hitting on religions, right? In other words, we can't do it, not ready, because that religion, they'll go crazy. They're going to go nuts, and these people can't handle it, and so forth. They use religion liberally as a way to maintain the truth embargo. No one really took much time to really go and talk to the people of the particular faith and say, what would you think about this? It was just, hey, just use them. And because I do not believe the reactions, even from those that are considered most, quote, vulnerable to a bad reaction, are going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. And then another thing is this. If an extraterrestrial was standing in front of me right now, I could simply say, do you know how the universe came about? Do you know what it was created from? And I do not think they know. I simply don't think they know. I know, we know they're advanced. We have a sense of where physics could go and so forth. But the idea that ETs would get to a point where they know what created the universe itself, I have grave doubts about that. So if that, how it could have been a god? Don't know. Okay, so there's that. And then there's this. Contactees very often have some latitude. They're able to even move around when they're in the presence of ETs, in craft or elsewhere. A lot of times you can't do anything. You're just lying on a table, you can't move. But many times they are. They even can speak. And when they can, not surprisingly, you don't know how much time you have. What are you going to ask them?
Yeah.
Right? What should I get my wife for her birthday? No. They ask them the obvious question. Is there a God? Hey, ETs from elsewhere, got to be really smart. Is there a God? Almost, as far as I know, in every case, they always say yes. Occasionally they're asked, do you believe in a God, or do you believe in a religion? The answer is usually yes. Now that's very interesting. There's only two explanations for that. Either they're telling them this because they feel it will make them feel more comfortable, because after all, they've been forced to come on a craft and lay on this table, whatever, or they actually believe that. It's one of those two things, right? I'm leaning towards the fact that some of these ET races do believe in a God. And so we'll find out maybe one day.
We'll find out.
But I bring this up because religion, and they have to stop using religion as a basis to maintain a government-imposed truth embargo. It is not right. It's disconcerting. I think it causes problems. It's just stop it. Come up with some other reason, but not that.
I'm with you on that, and I can't wait for the new crusades to begin. When we have to spot all the differences in their religion and our religions, and have to wipe out the inconsistent what are things that are heretical?
The ET heretics. Yeah. That's not going to go well, RJ. That's going to be a very bad crusade. It's going to be worse than the one where Saladin pretty much wasted Jerusalem. It will not go well.
All right. Gentlemen, I've kept you on way too long. We've got to do this again in a couple of months, maybe sometime after June, after disclosure has been done, and can get into it.
You mean after the report? After the report.
Yeah, after the report. Okay. Yes. The Rubio report.
Absolutely.
Sure. Happy to be back on. Just a quick question for you, RJ. Who was the colleague of yours that reviewed my documentary, The Underground?
That would be Stu Moran. And that's published over at criticalblast.com.
Okay.
So he's I've got a whole stack of stuff over here from MV. He reviews the esoteric stuff.
Okay.
Stu, if you're watching, I hope you have plenty of time on your hands, because Weird Wisconsin is coming your way. That's things like, Bill, who is Bill Rebane, the Monster A Go-Go invasion Earth, the Alpha incident, all that good stuff. And
Cool.
he finds them on Blu-ray, and he found yours on Blu-ray from Massacre Video or something like that. I can't recall who the
Okay.
distributor was, but it was just coincidence that he reviewed that. 60 Minutes came out. I'm like, oh, I'm putting his review in. I'm looking it up, and you were the director. I'm like, I know that guy.
Mhm.
We should talk again. This was
That's cool.
This was something trying to tell me somebody. And
RJ, I like the word esoteric. I do not like the word paranormal. Don't like paranormal, but esoteric I like. I think that is the word to describe these kinds of things, because there is nothing in this universe that is not normal. It is all.
Oh, of course. I'm talking, of course, normal in the micro bubble that a person lives in. Anything outside of that bubble is paranormal to them.
Yeah, paranormal. Yeah, it stands for psychic energy. It comes from a French word, so it kind of gets thrown around a little bit too much. But yeah, no, that's cool. Let's saw the film. If people want to see another film of mine, they can just go to www.occultjourneys.com, and at my website we have the posters for the film. You can click on that. It'll go through to a place you can actually watch the film, and then there's trailers, descriptions, all that type of stuff.
Now we're going to have to talk about that in depth sometime as well, because the documentaries that I've seen you do have been cryptids, which are animals that we haven't discovered fully yet, and UFOs. But the name of your company is Occult Journeys, which has an entirely different connotation to.
Interesting. Why did you call it Occult Journeys? I never asked you that, Darcy.
Well, I mean, occult, it stands for hidden things that are, very unacknowledged and possibly happening behind the scenes. And that some people think cult, but occult is totally different. And it doesn't mean something nefarious. Sometimes it just means something that's, a phenomena that's different. And I think a lot of the documentaries I focus on are of a phenomenon that's different. But if you look up the definition, people say it's supernatural, mystical, magical, practices or phenomenon. And
words take on connotations over time. Sort of like the word cult itself used to just mean, a small religious sect, and it's moved on to be, people who drink the Kool-Aid.
Language evolves. Esoteric, though. Esoteric Journeys. Consider the possibility of that one.
Esoteric.
Buy that domain, Darcy. By the way, for your viewers, Darcy and I both have IMDb pages, and we welcome you to drop in. And you can see all of his work, and then you can link to it and stuff. Of course, you got to go to the site to buy it. But because I'm a big guy on media. I believe that this will be the century of the documentary. That's how people are going to learn shit. They're not going to read a book. My God, are you crazy? You got to watch the videos and other media like this and podcasts.
And we're going to want to see it streaming.
The film industry is literally at the center of our culture, and it's going to be a huge factor in how we deal with the post-disclosure world, because it's how you get to people. And so Darcy is one of those documentarists that gets to people. He gets information out in ways that is appropriate to the modern age. And plus I admire people that make movies, because it's so hard. It is so difficult. Yeah. And they got to be really smart, and they've got to have a lot of talents. And I wish I was younger. If I had to start it over again, because I went to San Diego in 1972, a lost soul. And I did go up to LA, and I could have maybe entered a film school or whatever, got a waiter job, try to get some actor roles. I think I would have liked that. I think it would have worked out. Instead, I became a tennis bum. It was either that.
Nice.
So I did it again, because the film industry there's nothing cooler, nothing more fascinating, nothing more interesting or demanding than the film industry. It is amazing. The bad parts are awful, I get it, but the good stuff is just extraordinary.
Well, thanks for having me, man.
We gotta go.
We'll see you. Maybe in a couple of months. Darcy, if you get, I didn't get a chance to ask if you got a new documentary coming out anytime in the near future that we'll be reviewing and talking about. But if you do, spit it out now or email me and we'll get to it.
Sure. July.
July.
Secret Space UFOs, Part 1.
There you go. So we will see you both in July. And we'll talk.
One last thing. I will be on Coast to Coast tomorrow night for 2 hours. George Norrie. Drop by.
Cool.
Will
Okay.
do. Thank you so much.
Take care, guys.
Appreciate you guys.
Bye.
See you. Good night. And of course, to our viewers, a very good night. We thank you for dropping in. And as always, we just hope you had a